These are the 7 biggest mistakes that veterans make when transitioning out of the military. I don't think anybody fully grasps that the transition out of the military is going to be more difficult than you expect. Look, I spent 8 years on active duty. I had a 2-year break in service, and then I finished out 12 years in the Air Force Reserves. After my 8 years of active duty, I wish somebody would have sat me down and gave me the knife hand and kind of drilled these tips into me or how to avoid these mistakes. And after my 8 years of active duty service, I wish I would have avoided these mistakes. Look, I get it. Everybody's situation is unique, it's personal, and it's going to be different. And if I'm being honest, nobody's transition out of the military is 100% smooth. However, I believe that avoiding some of these mistakes will help your transition out of the military a little bit less painful and a little bit more comfortable. Mistake number 1, you don't have savings or you don't have an emergency fund. This is important because this is going to give you flexibility when you get out. Look, you may have some sort of a semblance of a plan because let's face it, you don't know what's going to happen when you get out. So having some money saved up is going to allow you some breathing room. Now, how much do you need to have saved up? Well, I would recommend at least having 6 months to maybe a year worth of your living expenses. And you might be asking, well, how do I know how much that is? Well, you have to budget. And by budget, I mean maybe just tracking your expenses. And this is going to do several things for you. One, it's going to tell you how much money is coming in versus how much money is going out, where you can potentially save or cut down on some of the expenses. And it just gives you a good general idea. It's a good habit to do. Look, I do one on a weekly basis since 2023. And I use a very simple spreadsheet. And if you want it, it's completely free. I'll link it down in the description below. The other thing I would consider to help you grow that fund a little bit quicker is put that money into a high yield savings account. Now, what a high yield savings account is going to do is it's going to give you some interest on your money. So anywhere from 3 to 5%, depending on the bank. You can do it online. It's still easily accessible. So take advantage of that compound interest that a high yield savings account will give you. Sure, 3 to 5% may not seem like a lot, but where else are you going to get that money? I'm also going to put a link for some of the best high yield savings account in 2025 in the description below, so you can do some research and go ahead and open that account. So now, I said 6 to 12 months, and at the very, very least though, I would highly recommend at least 3 months worth of expenses. So let's assume you're getting out very soon. At the very least, try to get as much money as you can saved up. I think this is going to at least buy you some wiggle room, some flexibility for when you transition out. Mistake number 2 is not having a plan or a semblance of a plan, right? Not everything is going to go 100% the way that you expect it to. So you need to take things into consideration and you need to have some sort of plan. Are you going to go to school? Do you have a job lined up? Do you plan on starting a business? Right? So you have to take these things into consideration because I'll tell you, when I got out, I just winged it and definitely not the way to go, not the way to do things. I struggled a lot for many, many years until I can land on my feet. And again, like I said, you may have a plan. You may need to even have a backup plan just in case, because you never know what's going to play out once you transition out of the military, which leads me into mistake number 3, and that's not knowing what resources are available to veterans when they separate. So if you're thinking about separating, you already know that whether or not you have the GI Bill and whether or not you've been using it. If you've already been using it while in service, great. You kind of already know how that works. However, if you've not used the GI Bill, I would highly encourage you to go out to your education center or reach out to a VA rep, a veterans rep somewhere, and start learning about how you need to activate the GI Bill. Did you know that you can go to school full-time and get paid BAH depending on where you live? I mean, that alleviates a lot of stress as well, where you're actually getting paid to go to school. That's an important resource to find out about and take action before you leave, or get things in place so that you know what needs to happen when you're out of the military. One thing I never knew about the military is that the VA offers healthcare for the individual. Maybe not for the family, but for the individual when you get out. So we all know that having some sort of medical insurance is mandatory in the United States. So definitely take a look in that. The other thing that you want to take into consideration is VA disability, whether something happened while in service. So I would advise you that well ahead of time, start to go see the military doc and start documenting some of these things that you might have issues with that might be able to give you some sort of VA disability rating. Any extra money that you can get after or post-military service is well warranted, especially if you had some sort of injury happen to you while serving on active duty or reserves. So again, knowing what resources are available to you are huge because they're only going to help you as you transition out. Mistake number 4, not figuring out where you're going to live. With this one, there's so much things to take into consideration. Are you single? Do you have a family? Do you have kids? Maybe if you're single, it's not as difficult. Maybe you'll just decide you want to go back home or maybe somewhere else. But wherever it is that you decide, you probably need to take into consideration cost of living. Are there any schools around that you might want to enroll into? What's the job market look like in that area? Conversely, if you have a family, there's more people that you need to take into consideration. And if you have kids, even more so. So if you have kids, you need to figure out, am I moving to a good school district? For your spouse, does my spouse have an opportunity to work? Is she currently working? Can she do remote? These are things that you need to take into consideration. Also, you want to consider, do I want to live near family? Do you not want to live near family? So there's a lot of things to consider when determining where you want to live post your military service. And again, everyone's situation is unique and it's different. So I would recommend that you talk this out with your loved ones, with your family, to make the best possible decision that you can for you and yours. Mistake number 5 is not seeking out guidance from folks that have transitioned successfully or have experienced this. Because as I mentioned before, it is difficult. Things don't go as planned. It's not smooth 100% of the time. You may feel like you have a bulletproof plan, but I can guarantee you there's going to be a wrench thrown in there somewhere. There always is. If you talk to 10 other veterans, they're going to tell you the exact same thing. So reach out to other folks, maybe previous friends that you had, previous supervisors that you might still keep in contact with, or just seek out other veterans reps out there that may have experienced this transition already and pick their brain. Figure out what were some of the hardships for them. Ask them questions like, what was the single most important thing you wish you knew when you got out? And take all of that into consideration when you're making your plan for you during your transition period. Hopefully, by you picking others' brains that have gone through this, you get some knowledge and you learn from their mistakes and you learn from my mistakes. And mistake number 6 is not considering joining the reserves or the National Guard. Look, I know that the reserves and the National Guard get bashed on as part-time warriors or weekend warriors or whatever you want to call them off of active duty. But I'll tell you what, when you get out of active duty, you miss the camaraderie. You're just not going to be able to replicate that in the civilian world. It's just not there. And if you're not 100% opposed to continuing to serve into the military in some capacity, I would highly encourage you to look into the Reserve or the National Guard, depending on where it is that you want to move to, and seeing if they have any spots available. That's going to give you the camaraderie. At the very least, you're serving in some capacity, and that is at least a monthly paycheck that you're getting that you may not be getting somewhere else. So if you're on the fence or completely not sure if you want to completely give up the military lifestyle, I think the reserves or the Guard would be a very good opportunity and a good experience for you to take on as you transition out of the military. Look, after some years, maybe you don't want to continue on to the reserves, but at the very least, you have some sort of familiarity already because you've been in the military, you've done the active duty side, so you already have some sense of how military life works. It's just a little bit more lax. I'll be honest, it is kind of a little bit more lax. If anything, it just gives you some maybe sense of security that, okay, I still have the military to kind of rely on. There's still services that I can reach out and get. You can always ask upper leadership. So you're not completely just stepping away from the military altogether. Look, my time in the reserves was actually very, very good. That was actually the time that I got to travel the most. I got to travel to various different countries across the world, where versus my active duty time, I was stuck in one location. And so joining the reserves gave me the opportunity to travel the world, and I'm super grateful for it. And I'm so glad that I did it. And I think the last mistake is not figuring out your purpose. Now, this one's difficult because you may not know what your purpose is, and you may not know right away. You may not figure it out while you're in the military, but things that you want to take into consideration. What are the things that you like to do? What are the type of people that you like to be around? What kind of things really drive my passion? And like I said, you may not get this figured out by the time you transition out, but at the very least, I'd like you to start thinking about, who am I? What kind of person do I want to become? what do I want to do with my life? This may change over time as well. And there's nothing wrong with that, with finding a new purpose or a new passion. But at the very least, you should at least start thinking about this and start figuring out what it is that you want to do. So look, as I stated earlier in the video, when I got out, I struggled a lot out of active duty. I was lost. I didn't have a purpose. I couldn't sell myself. I thought that the skills that I learned in the Air Force were going to give me a good job, and boy, was I wrong. So don't take that mentality. Understand that this is going to be a lot more difficult than you think or that you're anticipating. So I think that avoiding the 7 mistakes that I gave you, or prepping so that you don't have to make those mistakes, you're going to be a leg up and you're going to have a lot smoother transition. If you're still here, I appreciate you guys being here. If you could smash the like button, give me a sub, whatever, all the things, I would greatly appreciate it. It would mean the world to me. And with that, guys, I will catch you guys in the next one.